Hey there, friends. Greg here. Due to a little bit of technical incompetence on my part, this week's episode sounds like I am talking to Ed on a crappy telephone line from the other side of Earth. So Ed sounds fine. Luckily, on this episode, he does most of the talking because it's about his experiences in Phnom Penh. So apologies for that. Hopefully, next week we will be back to the same regular level of technical competence. But hey, what are you going to do? These things happen sometimes. It's not too bad. It's still listenable, but it's not great. So hope you don't mind. Apologies again, and we'll be back to normal next week. Thanks, guys. On this week's episode, Ed regales us with tales of his recent trip to Phnom Penh.
So if you're curious about how life in another Asian capital compares to Bangkok, you'll dig this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Hello there, people, and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who followed a friend to Thailand in 2001 and has only been nearly killed by a falling coconut twice since then. True story.
Wow, that's not bad. And I met Kenneth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract almost 19 years ago, started trying to learn the true name of Bangkok, which is about 21 words, and I haven't done it yet, so I've never left.
Cool. And I won't leave until I've done it.
Hey, it's pretty hard to memorize, dude. It's not easy. Anyway, before we start, a huge thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. For more info on how you can become a patron, just head to the support page on bangkokpodcast.com. Of course, one of the cool things our patrons get is an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we talk about current events in Thailand and whatever else comes into our minds. We just finished recording this week's bonus show, and we chatted about the recent bombings in Bangkok, the hyperbolic headlines, and how Thais and expats in Bangkok react to news that is usually pretty minor, but is sometimes turned very bad very quickly.
Never boring here in Bangkok. All right, well, before we jump into it, a couple of quick things right off the bat. First of all, shout out to our buddy Mario, who is a listener of the show. He's in town from Vienna, and I had a quick coffee with him the other day. He's married to a Thai woman, and they live in Vienna in Austria. And he's coming here to get their Thai wedding done in Thailand, and he's never met her family yet. So this is like he's going to like a small village up country to attend a Thai wedding with all of her family and probably hundreds of friends. It's going to be an overwhelming day for our buddy Mario.
Oh, wow. Good luck to you, Mario. That sounds like quite an adventure.
Yeah, so congratulations on the wedding, man. And I hope to see you next time you're in town. And also, we have to make a show note. This is episode 72.
Yeah,
season
baby.
3. And Ed, do you know how many episodes we did of season 2?
I believe 72.
That's right. This show means that we have now equaled the number of shows we did in season 2 back with our buddy Evo. So next week, man, we'll be into entirely uncharted new territory, and you win the championship for the longest serving Bangkok podcast co-host.
Yeah, baby. Does that mean I'm not a beginner anymore? I can't like use being a beginner as an excuse?
No, man, you're a veteran now. You're an expert.
Holy shit. I'm not sure I'm ready for that, dude.
All right, onwards and upwards. We're going to have 73 next week, and we'll see what comes up in the next, who knows, 1 to 20 years, depending on how long we keep doing this one. All right, well, on this episode, Ed is going to tell us all about his recent trip to Phnom Penh, which he had never been to before. I was there briefly for a few days about 10 years ago. I haven't been back since, which is kind of embarrassing because I thought it was a pretty neat city when I was there. I quite enjoyed it. And if you don't know much about Cambodia, I really recommend reading up on it because the country's history is equal parts incredible, tragic, heroic, inspiring. And the one overarching thing to keep in mind about Cambodia is that it essentially started from zero after the fall of the Khmer Rouge about 40 years ago. I mean, they had no currency, they had no infrastructure, millions of citizens had been murdered in a genocide, and only tattered remnants of the once mighty Khmer culture were left to build upon. So the fact that Cambodia even exists as an entity is an amazing accomplishment. That's not to say that it doesn't have big problems, but it's going through somewhat of a renaissance right now, and an expanding expat population, and an increasing number of people who are saying that if Bangkok is too expensive, too noisy, too big, or just to Bangkok, that Phnom Penh might be a good alternative. Now, as this is the Bangkok podcast, our official position is that this is a damnable lie, but it is something worth looking into. So we figured we'd ask Ed, who was just there. So Ed, what were your impressions of Phnom Penh?
Well, I'm going to cut to the chase and just say this.
All right.
I liked it. I recommend Phnom Penh to both tourists and expats, and I'm going to explain why. I've got a lot of pros. I've got some cons. And I just want to begin by saying that I'm not really an expert. Before I went, I read up on it, and I knew we were thinking about doing a show comparing Bangkok to Phnom Penh. And what I quickly found out is that there's like entire websites dedicated to expats arguing what is better, Bangkok or Phnom Penh. I mean, like there's like a hardcore like debate. Like I had no idea there was this long-standing argument amongst expats, like what's the better place to live. So if you just Google Bangkok versus Phnom Penh, you could just read for hours.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
It's like McDonald's versus Burger King is like
seriously,
unending argument.
It's Apple versus Microsoft, Bangkok versus Phnom Penh. So I cannot rival some of these online experts, but I did read up. So I tried to read all the stuff they had to say and then compare that to my actual experience. But of course, all you're getting is my take. So you might think otherwise. So this is just my unvarnished opinion.
All right.
Okay, so let me start out by saying that in some ways, comparing Bangkok to Phnom Penh is not really fair because Bangkok's population, depending on how you count, is probably something like 10 to 12 million, but Phnom Penh is probably somewhere around 2 million. So Bangkok is just much bigger and obviously more advanced. As you said, Phnom Penh has basically been rebuilt, and so it's just not as advanced or developed as Bangkok, and kind of like Chiang Mai. Like if you go to Chiang Mai, it's not as advanced or developed as Bangkok is, and it's also much smaller. But that being said, like if you're an expat, I think you have a choice. Like so, if you're a Bangkok expat and you're looking for a change, you have a choice. Like should I go to Chiang Mai? Should I go to Phnom Penh? Where should I go? So I do think it is fair to compare them, even though Bangkok is much bigger. The bottom line is you might be tired of Bangkok's size. So the fact that Phnom Penh is smaller, that might be a good reason to go there.
Right. Yeah. People get tired of Bangkok, just the sheer number of cars, the noise, like it's always noisy here.
Right. So the first impression I had of Phnom Penh is that it is like a chilled out version of a Southeast Asian city. So on the surface, it looks a lot like Bangkok. So it's less developed, obviously, far fewer skyscrapers, and it's clearly less developed. But it's still the same climate. On the surface, things kind of look the same, and the differences you become more aware of the more you're there. But it's a big Southeast Asian city. But it's just got this laid back feeling that at first I was like, wow, this feels like Chiang Mai. So everyone says like Chiang Mai is more laid back than Bangkok, right? That's like a cliche about Chiang Mai. But my buddy who's been living in Phnom Penh, he had a very good observation that it just sunk in with me. He actually said Phnom Penh is like a big beach city. And what he meant is that it just has this whole laid back vibe, like kind of everyone's on a holiday.
Really?
Yeah. So just to be clear, Phnom Penh is not on a beach. It happens to be on a river, like a fairly big river. And I for some reason, for me, I really like that characterization because it just, I don't know, like everyone there just seems to be like relaxed and having a good time. So it doesn't have any of the hustle and bustle of Bangkok in that, I don't know, people just don't seem to be stressed out, whether that's Cambodian culture, whether it's the relative lack of development, who knows? I'm just saying is I felt like I was in a big version of Krabi or something.
Yeah. Now, you weren't in Bangkok 30 years ago. People often say Phnom Penh is like Bangkok was 30 or 40 or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's also a valid. I'm presuming it's somewhat similar. I think in a way that might be another reason to go to Phnom Penh is to maybe see what Bangkok was like in the 80s or 70s. That's probably fairly accurate. So I would say in general, it's just more chilled out and relaxed. So that is kind of like reason number one. Like if you just want a place less hectic and less crazy, Phnom Penh is a great place to go. Now the odd thing there is traffic, and it is a crowded city. So I mean, it's a crowded Asian city, but it just has a different feeling. Like the traffic just moves. Like it's just so I was in traffic there, but I was never in a traffic jam. Like it's just flowing. Like I'm not exactly sure why. I don't know if it's like city planning, streetlights, numbers of people. You know how we've talked about how Bangkok has this problem where it just doesn't have enough roads. You know.
Yeah. Right.
So I don't know the reason why, but even when I was in what looked like crowded traffic, so I would come up to an intersection and I'd be like, oh shit, here we go. This is going to be an hour, but everything just moves. It just flows. So
what was it like? Were you in taxis?
Yeah. So they have like proper big taxis. They have big kind of old versions of tuk-tuks, but the hot thing now are like these smaller, more modern tuk-tuks, which are kind of everywhere. So my buddy said they're only a couple years old, and they're very easy to get with Grab. So unlike Bangkok, Grab works incredibly well in Phnom Penh.
That's cool, because Grab is one of the banes of my existence of life in Bangkok.
Agreed. I don't know what's wrong with Grab here, but it doesn't work. So my second point in Phnom Penh's favor is transportation is shockingly cheap. I don't know what's going on. I don't understand. I don't understand economics. But basically, when I took one of these tuk-tuks across Phnom Penh, it cost $1 or maybe like $1.25. So it basically cost 30 baht to get across the city.
Really?
It's so cheap, and Grab is everywhere. Now, thanks to my buddy's advice, my buddy basically said if you call a tuk-tuk yourself on the street, it'll be like 2 to 3 times more than that, which is still not that much, like 60 baht, 70, 80 baht. But he said I always use Grab, and following his advice, they were always available. And it was like $1 to $1.50 to go pretty much anywhere I wanted, like 30 to 40 baht. Now, in case our listeners aren't aware, Cambodia does obviously have its own currency, and it is available in the city. But almost everywhere I went functioned with American dollars. So everywhere. I was kind of surprised because I thought, for example, I assumed that, let's say I was at the airport, and the airport is run by the government. So I assumed like at the airport, I was going to have to pay for my visa on arrival in Cambodian money, but it's not like that. It's like all the fees are posted in US dollars. So even the government there accepts US dollars.
Well, that's funny. That's one of the things that tripped me up when I was in Siem Reap a few years back, is that everything is $1. Everything is $1 or like $2. So a bottle of water, $1. Sandwich, $1.
Right.
Trip in the tuk-tuk, $2. You want another bottle of water, $1. Bottle of Coke, $1. Beer, $2.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, it's just here. And then by the end of the day, you're like, oh, man, I've spent $50 today on these stupid little things.
Well, for one thing, I think Siem Reap is more of a tourist town. And so I don't think it's as cheap as Phnom Penh. So there are some of our listeners have to be better Cambodian experts than myself. Like I said, I'm not a Cambodian expert. I'm just giving you my take after 4 days in Phnom Penh. But I think Phnom Penh is a lot cheaper than Siem Reap. And Cambodian money is used for smaller denominations. So the bottom line is they can break $1, and not everything is like $1 or $2. Like, it'll be like $1.25, but they don't use American coins. So it's like they use Cambodian money as coins, basically.
Right.
So the second plus then is transportation. Like you can just get around the city like so cheaply. And like I said, there is traffic, but it moves. So it just has a totally different feeling than Bangkok. And I just felt like we were like zipping around, going here and there. And I was just amazed at how easy it was to get around.
Is there lots of motorcycles compared to cars, compared to Bangkok? Like in Vietnam, right? Like there's just motorcycles overwhelm you on the road.
It's not like that. So I have been to Ho Chi Minh. There are a fair number of motorbikes, but not like Ho Chi Minh or not even like Bangkok. So there's considerably less motorbikes. And instead, there's a lot of small, newer tuk-tuks and then bigger, older tuk-tuks. There's a lot of those things. So anyway, so that's the second plus. And I would say the third plus is this, and I don't know where it comes from. I don't, obviously I know that Cambodia was not exactly colonized by the French, but they were like a French protectorate.
Right.
So that I guess you could say they were occupied by France. And I don't know if that has anything to do with city planning or the way Phnom Penh is laid out. I have no idea. But let me tell you this, Phnom Penh uses the river incredibly well, way better than Bangkok uses the Chao Phraya. So the entire riverfront in Phnom Penh is kind of like public space. And on top of that, there's many parks, or at least wide open spaces in downtown Phnom Penh. So there's government buildings, there's parks. Okay, not as big as Lumpini Park, but instead of having like one big park like Lumpini and one big area like Sanam Luang, instead there's like 8 open spaces. And so it's so much more pleasant to walk around Phnom Penh. There's like a lot of grass. There's big open spaces. And at night, the local people are just hanging out on the grass. So you're just walking through the city and there's some big open space, maybe in front of a government building or a monument. And there's just families hanging out. It's a much more walkable, like pleasant kind of vibe. Like I think Bangkok has some small neighborhoods that are kind of like that. You know, it has isolated places. Like obviously Lumpini is cool. But I mean, this is like right in the center of Phnom Penh, where you're just walking down the street, and then there's a huge park with people just hanging out and eating and playing takraw, like hacky sack. It has just a more pleasant vibe. Like it's just everyone seems to be enjoying themselves, and it's just less intense than Bangkok. So anyway, I think the use of public space. And again, I don't know why it is that way, whether it's the French influence, whether it's when Phnom Penh was rebuilt, it was designed. But, you know, we've talked before about one of the problems with Bangkok is it's essentially an undesigned city. It's an unplanned city.
Right. It's grafted onto the top of a road network that existed hundreds of years ago. And they've sort of attempted to modernize it.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's part of Bangkok's charm is that it seems utterly random. Like someone just threw a bunch of sticks on a map and we're like, okay, those are the streets.
Yeah, right.
But Phnom Penh is not like that. Like the streets are basically a grid. You know, it's not like perfect, but check a map. Like the streets are basically in a grid. There's like a long riverfront. There's big open spaces. It's just a better designed city. It's just better designed than Bangkok. There's I don't even think it's debatable. It's just much more pleasant to get around.
Yeah, when I was there, we walked along the river at sunset, and I thought it was one of the most pleasant experiences I had on the trip. It reminded me a lot of actually walking along the Seine River in Paris. It was just really, really, I mean, obviously not the same, but very different, but everyone was out, everyone was walking, people were laughing and having a good time. And it was just, something about it was just really unusually pleasant.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, I mean, to that extent, then maybe Phnom Penh hasn't changed since you've been there. I mean, I have been to Siem Reap a couple times, and obviously Siem Reap has Angkor Wat, and I really like Siem Reap, but Phnom Penh is just, it's a different vibe. It's not Siem Reap. And it does have some.
If you go for a walk along the river in Bangkok, like it's impossible. You can walk for like 100 meters, and then you
that's right.
Go to the main river.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have talked about it. Bangkok does a bad job of utilizing the river. Phnom Penh, it's much better utilization of the river. And along with the use of open space, there's just way more trees in downtown Phnom Penh. Like, you know, Bangkok,
I miss those trees.
Yeah, Bangkok just doesn't have a lot of trees. And it's not every road, but along many roads, there's trees. There's green stuff. And it just makes a big difference. You know, just that whole thing makes a big difference.
Yeah, totally. And there's a couple of streets in Bangkok that are unusually treed, like Sukhumvit 26, I think, is really beautiful trees all along it. So to the point where, like, when you drive down a street that has a lot of trees, you're like, damn, this street has a lot of trees. It's beautiful. But Bangkok is just really underused in terms of trees. I think it's a shame. And every time I go outside and I see a road crew like lopping off the top third of these beautiful trees covering a street, I'm like, oh man, what are you doing? But it's nice when a city retains that, but Bangkok hasn't.
Right. Okay, so let me get into some potential negatives or kind of negatives compared to Bangkok. And some of them, again, are just going to be obvious based on the different size in the cities. The first potential negative is, although there is nightlife there and there are plenty of restaurants, it's obviously not as many as Bangkok. Like Bangkok is insane. Like we live in like food,
Right.
we live in food heaven. Like we live in,
Yeah.
we live in like nightlife heaven. There's just endless shit to do. And Phnom Penh, there's a fair amount of stuff to do. There's some cool, like almost like walking streets of bars. It's like there's definitely stuff to do. But, if you added everything up, it's probably 10% of what's in Bangkok,
Oh, really? That's small, eh?
Yeah, well, I mean, but think about how many places there are in Bangkok. Even 10% of Bangkok is still a lot.
Yeah, good point.
But it's still, it just can't compare to Bangkok. And again, it's not a totally fair comparison, like I said, but it's just something to factor in. Like if you're really into the variety of food in Bangkok, the variety of bars, the different types of bars, and
Like
just
the boisterous nightlife.
yeah, I mean it exists, but I think in Phnom Penh you're going to end up going to a much smaller set of bars.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
It's a much smaller set. I would say the second downside is I think there's still infrastructure problems there. For example, my mobile. So as soon as I got there, I got a mobile internet package, and
Okay.
it was just pretty spotty. And so I was talking to my buddy who lived there, who has a more permanent internet package, and he said it's usually pretty fast, but it periodically just goes down. And the irony is that at one point in the trip, I really needed to get a hold of him. Like we were trying to coordinate, and he was going to send a Grab to pick me up, and it was just he was just unreachable for like, and it wasn't like 10 minutes. He was unreachable for like 30 minutes, and I was just like, what happened? And then he basically just said like his mobile internet just went out, and so like his phone service went out, and so we just like we couldn't get a hold of each other, and so. He said it's really not that bad, but to be honest, in the 4 days I was there, probably 3 times I just couldn't get cell phone service. So,
Did you have to worry about anything like when you come to Thailand, you obviously have to be aware of certain cultural traditions and certain things you can't say and certain people you can't say things about. Did you have to like make yourself aware of anything like that?
I think that's a good question. I'll tell you something. The short answer is no, not really.
Right.
And on the plus side, I think that Thai people, as we've said, and of course I'm generalizing, are very nice. Like they're not confrontational and they're easy to get along with. I feel Cambodians might even be more so. Like I don't know, man. They were just really easy to get along with. And my friends, my friends who are there, who've been there, one friend for several years, one for about 9 months. They both said the same thing. They were like, Thai people are nice, but they were like, damn, like Cambodians are even nicer than Thai people are. They're just easy to get along with. However, I want to point this out, and this is an interesting fact, and as a heads up to our listeners, I met a Cambodian guy there who happens to carry an American passport. So he was a guy born to Cambodian parents in the States. So he's an American citizen. But his parents moved back to Cambodia when Cambodia was starting to rebuild. So I don't know the exact story, but I'm guessing that his parents or his family fled the Khmer Rouge to the States. He was born in the States. And then I think in the early 90s, when Cambodia was like on the up and up, they moved back to their home country. So he spent, I think he said 6 or 7 years in the States as a kid, then came back to Cambodia, and he's been there like since then. And so
Okay.
he's Cambodian American guy. And we were talking about all kinds of stuff. His English is obviously great. We were discussing Cambodian history. And
Right.
I referred to Cambodia as a former French colony.
All right.
Which is just generally how I've thought about it. And he stopped me and he said, we were actually a protectorate and not a colony. And I actually, from my own knowledge of history, I understood what he was referring to. And it's kind of a point of debate. Essentially, I think what the French did in Cambodia and Laos is they basically said to them, like, we will protect you from Siam, we'll protect you from Thailand. And again, I don't know the details, but I think Laos and Cambodia kind of took that bargain. So they basically kind of, to some extent, accepted French rule to be free of Thai rule.
I see. Okay.
So, and again, I'm sure our listeners out there, some of you may be Cambodian, or you might understand Cambodian history better than I do. But it's something to remember. I would suggest when you're in Cambodia, don't refer to it as a former French colony.
Just to be safe.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. While you were saying that, I quickly opened my handy dandy dictionary here, and the definition of a colony is a country or area under the full or partial political control of another country, and occupied by settlers from that country. And the definition of a protectorate is a state that is controlled and protected by another. So they're different, but there's some overlap there.
I think his argument was kind of that maybe the Cambodian leadership really kind of accepted French rule as opposed to being forcefully colonized. I think Cambodia wanted to get rid of Thai rule was their number one priority. And the French were strong enough. With the French were strong enough, they could kick the Thais out of Cambodia, and Cambodia took that deal. So maybe not a good idea to refer to Cambodia as a former French colony. I would use the word.
Interesting, yeah.
Use the word protectorate. Be respectful of people's history. Use the word protectorate.
That is interesting, and this gets into a whole deep area too, because as white people from Western countries like this, I mean, I don't need to say that we're obviously pretty blasé about this stuff, obviously, because we're historically, European Western powers have been on the quote unquote winning end of colonial disputes.
Yeah.
So we often sort of don't see the things with as much nuance or shades of gray, and maybe you may take offense as easily as some other people would. But when it's your country that's being controlled or colonized or protected or whatever, I mean that's a sensitive issue, and we need to be ready to tackle that and listen to what people think about it.
Yeah, no doubt. If you are traveling in any foreign country, just be respectful of their tradition. Try to educate yourself about the history, and don't throw around your interpretation of their history. It's probably not a good idea. But anyway, I got more positives to talk about, and again, this depends on who you are. But I asked my buddies a lot about the Cambodian police and government, and Greg, we were just talking about the TM30 crackdown in Thailand, the bureaucratic nature of the Thai government, the paperwork you have to do, also the police checkpoints along Sukhumvit. This last year, I've been had my pockets searched a couple times on Sukhumvit, and so I was really curious, like, what's up with the Cambodian police? And both my buddies were like, I may have seen some cops once. Like,
really?
That was their attitude. And I was looking around on the streets. There's like no police presence.
I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It depends. But my buddy said that, and again, I don't want to get into the details of the visa rules, but in general, it's much easier to get a visa in Cambodia and stay there. So one of my buddies who's there is there because he wasn't able to renew his visa in Thailand over and over again. And because of the crackdown we've talked about on previous shows, he went to Cambodia because it's just easier. So at least right now, Cambodia seems much more welcoming towards expats than Bangkok does or Thailand does.
Interesting.
On top of it, they don't have like police checkpoints, and they're not rummaging through the pockets and wallets of foreigners there. So, I mean, I really think that Thailand has to, I don't know, like I think they're really turning off foreigners and expats with the bureaucracy and the kind of heavy-handedness. And so I, having been in Phnom Penh for a few days and kind of enjoying it, and my buddies telling me how easy it is to live there as foreigners, I don't know, man. We might have to open up we might have to open up the Phnom Penh podcast, dude.
Right. Yeah, man. I mean, when you kill your golden goose, there's always people waiting in the wings to take it over, right? So, I mean, just take the temperature of the reaction, right? Like, if foreigners start leaving Thailand, I'm sure Cambodia will be more than happy to say, "Come on in. Our visa laws are way easier to understand." So,
yeah, at least for now. I mean, of course, it could change. I mean, but, politics can change. Attitude towards foreigners can change. I think the expat population there is obviously much smaller. So, maybe Cambodians are in a frame of mind where they're welcoming foreigners. It seems now that the Thai government is in this kind of frame of mind where I don't want to say they're discouraging expats, but they certainly don't seem to be like begging us to stay. They're not like, please, Mr. Foreigners, please stay here. They're not in that kind of frame.
Well, it seems to me that your experience can be summed up by saying, if you're bored by Bangkok, don't go to Phnom Penh because it's smaller and more laid back. But if you're bored of Bangkok, Phnom Penh might be an interesting alternative.
That's a good way to put it. I mean, I think if you're sick, if you feel stressed out in Bangkok for whatever reason, I think Phnom Penh is a good alternative. Like I think I like my buddy's description. It feels like a big Thai beach town, even though it's obviously not even a beach town. Like my whole feeling there was just that like everyone was on holiday, including all the Cambodian people. That was just my feeling. I mean, so I don't know if that, like I said, I don't know if that's Cambodian culture or if it's just the fact that it's less developed and people don't have like hardcore careers. Like, there's not a lot of major corporations there. There's not a lot of industry. So people don't, maybe there's not so intense intense jobs, where people are grinding out like 60-hour work weeks. It's just, it's just chilled out. Now, like I said, there's not as much to do there, but certainly there's enough to keep you busy for like an extended holiday. I don't know if it's enough to keep you interested for years, but it's certainly enough to like keep you interested for months, I think. So I think for tourists who normally would, I think, I still believe that you have to go see Angkor. Angkor Wat is like a must see.
Yeah, definitely.
In general, I hate tourist stuff. I mean, I've said it before. I'm not a tourist. I hate it. But Angkor Wat is an exception. I think you got to go check it out. But I think I made a mistake by not going to Phnom Penh earlier. So I think as a tourist you should. I think as a tourist you should add it to your list. And I think as an expat, as long as you factor in, a few like logistical things, I think you should consider Phnom Penh as an alternative to Chiang Mai. So if you're like in Bangkok and you're like, hey, I want to go somewhere chilled out, but you're thinking of you might be interested in checking out a different culture. Cambodian culture is related to Thai culture, but it ain't the same. It's like they have a different history.
Right.
The language is, shares some words because of the history they've had, but Cambodian isn't even like a tonal language. Like it's actually historically, it's a different language than Thai. It's just they've borrowed a lot of Thai words since they were occupied by Thailand for so long. But it has a very different history, actually. Like a lot of times to outsiders, you might think like, oh, Thais, Cambodians, like Laotians, yeah, they're all the same. But that is not true.
Like Americans, Canadians.
That's right. Like, actually, that is kind of true. We basically are the same. But,
How dare you? How dare you, sir?
Dude, I grew up on maple syrup. We got maple syrup too, man. We got hockey. We got maple syrup.
I guess so.
We don't have the Mounties, though. That kind of shit we don't got.
Well, All right. Well, as we're getting ready to wrap up, then I'm curious about crime. What did you think about crime in Phnom Penh as compared to Bangkok?
Okay, let me just say this. I got into an argument with my buddies there because I had read online that there was a lot of street crime in Phnom Penh. But my buddies were trying to say it's not that bad compared to Bangkok. But when I read the data online, and again, I'm not an expert, there does seem to be more snatchings. It's like in particular, which I know it does occur in Bangkok, but I feel it does occur more in Phnom Penh, where motorbike guys buzzing past people like snatch phones out of people's hands. They like snatch bags of people who are like in a tuk-tuk. And I do, Bangkok, I think, has a fair amount of pickpocketing and some snatchings. But I would recommend this before you go to Phnom Penh. Do your research online. Read TripAdvisor and stuff. And people who go to Phnom Penh regularly, they warn you, be careful using your phone on the street and keep your bags like across your body, not like over your shoulder.
Right.
So I'm gonna, no matter what my buddies say who live there, based on my online research, I think there's more snatchings in Phnom Penh. So I would be, of course, as a foreigner, you should always be alert because you tend to be a target for pickpockets or criminals. I think Phnom Penh is worse than Bangkok when it comes to that.
Good to keep in mind. And a final thought for me too. This is not really related to much, but if you're curious, listeners, Google Cambodian donut owners in Los Angeles. There's a really interesting history there about why most donut shops in California are owned by Cambodian refugees. And there's a bunch of stories about it. There's some documentaries on it on YouTube. But just Google it and follow that rabbit hole. It's really interesting. Check it out.
Cool story.
All right, let's get into some love, loathe, or live with, where one of us surprises the other with a particular aspect of life in Bangkok, which we then discuss and decide if it's something we love about living here, loathe about living here, or have come to accept it as just a part of life in the crazy city of Bangkok. And this week, it's my turn. I'm going to lay it right on the line for you, Ed. Ice cubes in beer.
Whoa, that's a classic. That is such a classic. This is a painful issue. So you've opened up you've opened up a wound.
Oh, I'm sorry, man.
You've opened up a wound because I remember when I got here and I saw Thai people putting ice into beer, and I said I will never do that.
Right.
And then I think about 3 years in, I started doing it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's, I still have this residual sense that it's wrong because that's how I was raised. That's how I was raised. Like you don't put you don't put ice into beer because ice melts and it waters the beer down. You don't do that.
Yeah, so, you're essentially drinking light beer after 10 minutes.
Yeah, but the truth is I got sucked in. I just started doing, because it's hot here, and so the beer gets warm faster, and I like ice cold beer. So the bottom line is I can't. I would love to say loathe. I'd love to just stick with my American background and be like, loathe, man. I never do that. But the bottom line is I've been co-opted. I've been assimilated into like the tropical way, and I regularly
resistance is futile.
It is like, so I admit I'm a bit embarrassed to admit it, but I do put ice in beer now. So I guess I'm gonna have to go live with.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. I was never a big beer drinker. I came here when I was 26, so I was never a big beer drinker in my early 20s. So I never really had like a routine or anything. But it is weird for foreigners to think of ice and beer. But now I don't bat an eye. I'm like, yeah, all right, whatever. I'll take it without or with or whatever. But I do appreciate when I go to a bar and instead of putting ice in the beer, they pull out a glass from the freezer that's cold.
Oh yeah, that is the best.
Yeah, there's a little Vietnamese restaurant close to me that they put a little bit of water, like a couple centimeters of water in the bottom of the mug, and then freeze that.
Oh, right.
So you actually have ice at the bottom of your mug, which is nice. So I would say live with too. If it happens, I don't bat an eye. But yeah.
Well, I'm gonna have to say to any Americans listening, or God forbid anyone from Ohio, I'm sorry.
That's funny.
I don't know what else to say.
I'm sorry.
I don't know what else.
Don't tell my parents.
I don't know what else to say. All right. So before we wrap up, I'd like to give a special thanks to all of our lovely patrons. As you know, we don't run ads or have sponsors, so we really, really do appreciate the support we get from our patrons. If you want to learn more, just head to bangkokpodcast.com/support. And if you want to get in touch with us, it's easy. Bangkok Podcast on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We are very polite, and if you write, we will answer.
Right on. You can also find each episode on YouTube, and you can also follow us online where we post each episode and carry on conversations with listeners. You can also reach out to me directly on Twitter where I am BKK Greg. So thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you back here next week.